Morning, WellSpring. It's so good to have you here with us today, online watching. Here we are back in this online reality again. We're going to be in this same spot for the next 3 weekends, in case you hadn't heard, so you're aware, going along with the mandates that have been given and such. And really, the words of that last song have been our prayer this week, that even when we don't see it, that God, you're working, that you're bringing healing and life and wholeness to our community and to you, the church, through this Lent. I'm just standing here in an empty room over here in the corner of this space, but I'm trusting that God is doing something outside of just this little corner in the room, in this little space, and I'm praying for that for you guys this morning. Today if you don't have it, go ahead and open up the app. The app has got a message thing you can follow along with. We've been starting that the last couple of weeks. Feel free to do that. You can follow along specifically with this message, because today we're continuing our series out of Psalms chapter 22, Summer in the Psalms. So if you have a Bible or on a Bible app, you can pull that up. Psalm 22, some prophecy about Jesus. It's a great passage, and we'll be looking at that in just a minute. But before we do that, I wanted to just say a word to honor a friend of mine. If you hadn't heard, Keith mentioned it earlier on the Morning Mug. Alan Dyer passed away this week, and Alan was our friend. And just want to say a word of honor to him, a great man of God. And I was reminded of him this week because at the end of this message, if it goes the way that I'm hoping that it does, I'm thinking that it will, it's kind of a call to action where it's calling us, the people of God, to rise up and to be and to do and all of that. And when I was looking over that message, I was reminded of a message I'd done several months ago that Alan had been in attendance for. And at the end of the message, the room was kind of quiet, but it was kind of a rousing call to do something. And honestly, I was a little self-introspective. I was out in the courtyard thinking, did that go like I thought it did? It seemed like no one was reacting. And so Alan came out beaming and said, "Man, that was a good one. That was a real good one." And it kind of encouraged me. And he said, "I got to tell you, they were pretty quiet in there, but the churches I grew up in would have been a lot louder for you this morning than they were." And I was just reminded of Alan this week, and it made me smile. So I tend to think that in heaven you get glimpses of things. And so, Alan, we're grateful that you're not in any pain today, and we want to honor you this morning. So do you ever get a song stuck in your head? Like maybe you're in a store and there's a song in the background, and even as you leave the store, you catch yourself singing that song later. Or maybe you're in your car, and right before you get out of your car, a song starts, and you just hear the first lyric or two, but you're singing as you go into Kroger or whatever because it's in your head now. And maybe the rest of the day even, you're singing that song over and over, and all you heard was just that first line or two. But it's just powerful. Something about music is powerful that way and gets in your head. And I want to do that to you today, not to drive you crazy, but just to get this thought in your mind. So I'm going to start a lyric, and I want to see if you can do the back end of that. So if you put your right foot in and you put your right foot out, you're thinking hokey pokey, right? Because it's just that song. Or let me get you a little more patriotic. We just did July 4th. So from the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, you've got Lee Greenwood in your head now. You're welcome for that. Or go back a little further on a warm summer's evening on a train bound for nowhere, and you've got the gambler. If you're over a certain age, you've got the gambler in your head. If you're not, then you can look that up on YouTube later. But you hear the first line of the song, and like the rest of the song auto-populates because just God works your brain that way. And the Psalms are like that for the Jews. So the Jews would have been very familiar with the Psalms. They would have known the words and the lines and the lyrics behind those, probably musically as well as just lyrically. And so they would hear the first line and they would auto-populate the rest of those Psalms. So Jesus is hanging on the cross, and he cried out in Matthew 27, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This wasn't just a cry of anguish. He was quoting Psalm 22, the first line of Psalm 22, and the Jewish crowd would have recognized that line as the first line of Psalm 22, and they would have begun to think, like you did with the Hokey Pokey or Kenny Rogers or Lee Greenwood, they would have begun to think about the rest of Psalms 22 as Jesus was hanging up on the cross. It had been in their head. They'd have been thinking of those words. And this changes the way you read Psalm 22. And this changes the way you read the story of the crucifixion, the account of the crucifixion, because they would have had Psalm 22 playing in their head as Jesus was there spending the last moments of his life in anguish. So you have Jesus on the cross, put there by religious leaders. He's beaten, he's spat upon, he's rejected and defiled. And all the while, he's living out the lyrics of Psalm chapter 22 that had been written about 1,000 years before he was even born. It's a powerful prophecy. Verses like Psalm 22, 7 and 8. It says, all who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they said. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Now, I think this would have stung just a little bit. Because verse 1, that he actually said, my God, why have you forsaken me? They would have heard that, and then they would have begun to think of the verses later, and they would have thought of this verse here, and they would have realized when they got to that part of the song in their head, oh, wait, somebody did just say to him, let God save him if he's so special. In fact, I wonder if maybe kind of they were even looking at each other across the crowd saying, is he quoting Psalm 22? Because you just said what he just said you were going to say from verse 7 and 8. It gets worse. Verse 14, where Jesus speaks the first line of the song, and then they get down to verse 14. Verse 14 says, I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It's melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Now, if you want evidence that they were thinking along this passage in Psalm 22 while he's on the cross, because he put that first lyric out there, if you want evidence of that, what happened right after he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? What did the people in the crowd do? Somebody said, he must be thirsty. Let me give him something to drink. And they came back with something to drink because they got down to verse 14 in their head and said, oh, shoot, he's quoting Psalm 22. And they went and got him something to drink. Verse 16. It says, dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. Now remember, this psalm was written about 1,000 years before Jesus was born. Crucifixion wasn't even invented yet when David penned these words. The Persians invented crucifixion and later passed on to the Romans a couple hundred years after David's writing of Psalm 22. So let me say that a different way. God predicted the crucifixion of the Messiah before crucifixion was a thing, because God knew it was coming, and God knew that that's how his son would die. Verse 17. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them, and they cast lots for my garment. This is the fourth very specific prophecy out of Psalm 22 that Jesus refers to from the cross, and that Jesus fulfilled from the cross, lived out over 1,000 years after David predicted them. I mean, God knows that the executioners are going to not only kill Jesus, but how they're going to kill Jesus. And he knows that at his feet during the crucifixion, they're going to be casting lots for his garments. I can't even tell you school's going to open up next month, and God knows what's coming 1,000 years before it happens. So when God says, my ways are higher than your ways, you need to know he's telling you the truth, maybe even a little more than you realize he's telling you. He knows things that you don't know and that I don't know. And he sees things that you and I can't explain, and he can't explain them to us because we wouldn't understand them if he tried to. We don't even understand the framework that God's dealing with, let alone the specifics. I mean, right now, you don't realize it, but in this space, we have a whole team of folks making this happen. There's cameras, and there's computers, and there's switchers and lights and all this different kind of stuff. I would tell you all that they did to make it happen, but I don't even understand all that they did to make it happen. I'm just appreciative for it. And you wouldn't understand it if I explained, well, a few of you would. Most of you wouldn't understand it if I tried to explain it to you, because I wouldn't explain it very well, because I don't even understand the framework of what's happening. Their thoughts are not my thoughts. And when God says, I know things you don't know, and I understand things you don't understand, he's even probably more true than you realize. He knew that Jesus was going to die, how he was going to die, what was going to happen around his death 1,000 years before it did. You and I don't even know what's going to happen next month. You can have some comfort. You and I should take some comfort, because when I don't know what to do, when I don't know where to go, when I don't know what's coming next with all the changes of the virus and the quarantine and the riots and all the stuff that makes us anxious, when I don't understand anything of what's coming, God does. And we should take comfort knowing that God knows where this life is going. God's got it. He's got you. You can rest in his comfort, because he knew 1,000 years before Jesus was crucified how that was all going to go, and it hadn't even been invented yet. The people would mock him and say, let God save him, that they would cast lots for his clothes. So he's not confused today. Even though we're all confused with the virus and the election and the quarantine and the riots, we're all confused. He's not confused. So if you're a believer in God, this psalm should bring you comfort in uncertain times. And one of my key ideas for you this morning is that the creator of the universe is watching over you. Your creator is watching over you. And he's going to guide you through this mess. And he knows how to get you from where you are in the middle of this storm to a safe harbor, but you've got to trust him more than you do. I've got to trust him more than I want to. And you need to lean on God, and you need to cry out to God, and you need to do whatever it is he says, because he knows not only where you are better than you do, he knows how to get you where you want to go better than you know how to get you where you want to go. You should take comfort in knowing that God knows where this life is going. But this passage should also bring comfort to you if you're not sure you do believe, because this is a prophecy that gives real legitimacy to what Jesus did. I mentioned 4 very specific prophecies out of Psalm 22. That last one about him being crucified is sometimes listed among 7 very prominent prophecies about Jesus from the Old Testament. I'll put these on the screen. If you've got if you're not watching on your phone, maybe take a screenshot if you're watching on your phone, but if you're not watching from your phone, maybe take a picture of the TV or whatever. I think these verses would be great for you to look at later, since we're not going to look at every one of them in detail this morning. But let me just highlight them. Messiah is to be born in a small town. He would have someone as a forerunner. He would have somebody whose whole way of life was designed around helping them prepare the way for Jesus. He would ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. He would be betrayed by a close friend. That betrayer would receive 30 pieces of silver and then give that silver to a potter. I mean, these are very specific. In fact, let me show you that one specifically. Zechariah 11 says, I told them, if you think it best, give me my pay, but if not, keep it. So they paid me 30 pieces of silver, and then the Lord said to me, throw it to the potter, the handsome price at which they valued me. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and I threw them to the potter at the house of the Lord. That's very, very specific, and Judas fulfilled every piece of that along with the high priest and leaders. Another prophecy is that he would be silent before his oppressors. And then this passage from Psalm 22 that he would die by crucifixion, 7 of those. And Jesus fulfilled every single one, hundreds or thousands of years after it was predicted. You know, the power of multiplication is really powerful. Not just that one of those would be true, but that every one of those are true. And when you put the odds of each one together, it's a big number. Like, think about it. All the people born in the world, has ever been born in the world, the Messiah has to be one who was born in Bethlehem. That limits it way, way down right there. At the time of Jesus' life, Bethlehem was a very, very small town. So out of all the people born in Bethlehem now, a small group, how many of them were crucified? We know Jesus fit both of those, but he might be the only one ever in history to be born in Bethlehem and then later crucified. But if there's any others, it's a small, small, small group. And that's only 2 of the 7. Then you got to throw in all the others. The power of multiplication on that is astounding. Let me prove it in a little bit unspiritual way. I brought with me some nectar of the gods. This is peach unsweet tea. I used to do peach tea, sweet tea, but I'm getting old. So peach unsweet tea, it really is the nectar of the gods. And at Sonic, it's a beautiful thing. I went this morning in the rain to get this. My excuse was so I could show you, but really I just wanted some peach tea. But you can get this plain, or you can get it with peach. You can get it sweet or unsweet. You can get it with cherry, orange, mango, green apple, grape, blackberry, vanilla, mint, raspberry, watermelon, blue coconut. The list goes on. By the way, I don't even know what blue coconut is. I'm not even sure what that means. But you can get that in your tea if you'd like. 27 different flavors, or the combination of any 2 or 3 of those flavors. You can also get it with nerds added, which would just be weird in tea. But you can do that if you'd like. Or you can do that to any of the sodas. You can get that on your Dr. Pepper, your Coke, or your Diet Coke. I'm not sure what happens if you do all that with Diet Coke. That's a whole separate. Anyway, but you can do all of that. It's really powerful. So the people at Sonic have estimated, actually figured it up scientifically, if you put all those options together and made one drink of each option, you would get 1,063,953 different drinks at Sonic. So to guess what somebody's getting at Sonic, pretty easy for me, by the way, if you ever get on Jeopardy, it's peach tea. But for everybody else, there's over 1 million options. You have a less than 1 in a million chance of guessing what somebody's getting because there's so many options. That's the power of multiple variables statistically, scientifically. So how does this apply to Jesus? The odds of any one person doing all 7 of those, many of which they cannot manipulate or force, things like their own death, where they were born, having a close friend choose to betray them, the odds of any one person fulfilling all 7 of those is astronomical. Dr. Peter Stoner, who's a math and astronomy professor, calculated the odds of any one single person fulfilling all 7 of those major prophecies is 1 in 100 quadrillion. That's a real number, I promise. A quadrillion is the next step past trillion. So you have million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, 1 in 100 quadrillion, but that's a really hard number to understand. So let me give you some examples of what that's like. So I have here a marble. They were teasing me earlier, said I'm like Carrot Top today with all my props. So I got a marble here. That's probably the only connection. Anyway, I got a marble here. Let me stop talking. My daughter Kara gave me, so thank you, Kara, for that. And I also brought with me a kiddie pool here ready to go. So I got to thinking about, I found on the internet that you can put 150,000 marbles in a kiddie pool. Now, how in the world does the internet know that? I don't know. Somebody, 1, 2. I mean, I don't know how you figure out, I don't even know what that, but 150,000 marbles in a kiddie pool. Now, what would the odds be if I were to put 150,000 marbles in the kiddie pool and put a little bitty dot on one of them and blindfolded pick that out? Now, some smart aleck's saying, well, 1 in 150,000. Thank you. I appreciate your support for that. But the odds are, the point is, it's really astounding. Like if I were to do it this morning, 150,000 marbles, and I just happened to pick the right one, you'd all think it was rigged, right? Because there's just no way that one person's gonna do that. In fact, even if I could do it in 8 or 10 tries, you'd say that was rigged. There's no way you can do that on your own. That's not nearly as big odds as one guy randomly or even fraudulently fulfilling all 7 of these prophecies like Jesus did. Let's make it bigger. Give me 100 kiddie pools. Spread them all out over the room here. 100 kiddie pools, all of them full of 150,000 marbles. One marble gets marked. I randomly pick the right pool and then happen to pick the right marble. No way. It's just ridiculous. The odds of Jesus doing what he did are far more unlikely than that. In fact, there are 7 billion people in the world. If you gave each of them 100 kiddie pools, each of those kiddie pools full of 100,000 marbles, that's about the odds we're talking about, that you randomly pick the right guy in Nigeria somewhere that has the right kiddie pool. You pick the 1 out of 100 that's the right kiddie pool. You pick the 1 marble out of 150,000. That's the kind of odds we're talking about, 1 in 100 quadrillion. It's crazy. Absolutely ridiculous. In fact, you're twice as likely to be the guy who gets struck by lightning, attacked by a shark, and then wins the Mega Million Powerball. All 3, you're twice as likely to do that as you are to be randomly the guy who does all 7 of these prophecies. And that's just one of them. And there's literally dozens and dozens and dozens, over 100 prophecies in the Old Testament alone about Jesus, and he meant every single one. It would require more faith to believe that was just random than to believe that he's God. I mean, it would require more faith to be an atheist based on the prophecies than to believe that Jesus was who God said he was going to be. Jesus changed the world because he was God. And he died not for his sins and crimes, but for mine and for yours. And you should take comfort in knowing that you don't have to jump off some intellectual cliff to believe in Jesus, because he is who he said he is. So if you've never given your life to Jesus, because maybe intellectually it's a leap too far, you just can't get past the science of it, I want you to look at it again. Your Creator cared enough about you to send his Son to come and die for you, and he's powerful enough that hundreds and even thousands of years before that happened, he laid out exactly how it was going to go, so that when it went that way, you could today in 2020 look back with some confidence that, wow, that really is what God said it was. And if I can trust him on that, I can trust him on everything else. You should take comfort from that. So this passage, Psalm 22, isn't just a prophecy, it's also a vision. I want you to look at the end of the passage. The beginning of the passage all tells you how it's going to happen. And then the end kind of talks about what's going to happen now that it's happened. Verse 25 says, "From you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you, I will fulfill my vows." He's speaking as Jesus at this point, saying that after the crucifixion, Jesus is going to say, I did what you said. Jesus fulfills his vows. He's going to fulfill what he started. He's not going to leave it undone. He's going to finish it. So when Jesus cried out, "It is finished," he wasn't giving up. He was declaring victory. It is now finished. I did what I said I was going to do. And now look at all the things that are going to be in store for us, for the world, because of the victory, the finishing mark that Jesus did on the cross. Let me show you. Verse 26 says, the poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. Because of the kingdom that Christ has ushered in, the poor will be fed and they'll be satisfied because of what Jesus has done. They'll turn and praise the God of the universe. Verse 27 says, all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him, for dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. Christ now rules over the nations. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, he said. The nations, literally, specifically, the people groups. He's not talking about geopolitical nations. He's talking about all the different ethnicities. I'm now at dominion over all of those. Now catch this. David is prophesying about Jesus 1,000 years before he's born, saying that he's going to reunify all the different nations and ethnicities and races. He's prophesying that Jesus' death is going to usher in a time of racial harmony because dominion belongs to the Lord over all the nations, not just one or two or three, all of them. This is all the way through the Bible, friends. In Genesis 12, God tells Abraham that because of his relationship with God, he's not only going to bless him, he's not only going to bless his descendants, he's going to bless the whole world. He says, I'll bless those who bless you. Whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. In the beginning, God tells Abraham, I'm going to bless the whole world through you, all the different peoples, all the different nations, all the different ethnicities. I'm going to bless all of them because of my relationship with you. And then in the end, fast forward to the end of this, John sees a vision of the end of time. And in Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, he said, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, every tribe, every people, every language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. The Bible starts with promising that through faith, I'm going to reunite all the ethnicities, all the nations. And in the end, we see a vision of God's going to fulfill what he said. He's going to do what he said he's going to do and reunify all of that and bring harmony to the world. And there in the middle in Psalms 22. In Psalms 22, David says it's the leadership of Jesus and his sacrifice on the cross that's going to make that vision a reality. They will not be drawn together on their own. They're certainly not drawn together now. And it's the leadership of Jesus that will draw them together. So how's he going to do it? I mean, if he's not done it yet, how's he going to do it? The starting point was the cross, but obviously that didn't finish it. And yet he said just a moment ago, he's going to fulfill what he said. He's going to finish what he starts. How's he going to do it? How's he going to feed the poor? How's he going to cause them to be satisfied? How's he going to cause the races and the ethnicities to come back together? He said he'll fulfill his vow so we can trust him, but how's he going to do it? Matthew 16:18, he tells us, he said, I'll build my church and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I'll build my church, he says, and the gates of hell won't be able to keep my church out. Gates are defensive, and the church won't be kept out of all the dark areas on the earth because God's going to build it. And he's going to do it with the power of the cross. Now, Jesus, if you don't know the context, is talking in Caesarea Philippi here, one of the most wicked places in all the ancient world. It's like the Las Vegas of Jesus' day. Kind of what happens in Caesarea Philippi stays in Caesarea Philippi area. So here he is standing amidst all this sin, all this destruction, all this nastiness. And in the middle of that city, he declares, I'm going to build my church, and none of the darkest places on earth are going to be able to keep out my church. None of the wickedness, none of the poverty, none of the racism, none of the violence, none of it will be able to keep out my church because I'm the Christ, the one who lays down his life for the world. And you know his sacrifice is key because just a few verses later in Matthew 16, he says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. So I'm going to do it, and here's how I'm going to do it. Let me explain it to you. I'm going to do it not by triumphing politically. I'm going to do it by laying my life down for you and for the world as an example for the church to follow so that one day they, like me, will lay their life down for the people in their life. And together, I'm going to do these great things. When they sacrifice their comfort, when they sacrifice their convenience, when they sacrifice their options, the gravest of evils will not be able to keep my church out. The gates of hell will fall when my church takes up their cross and follows after me. It's sacrifice that gets us there, friends. Mark Moore says, like Jesus' death, our suffering and sacrifice have saving power, not just for the individual soul, but for society as a whole. As Jesus died to atone for our personal sins, so we die to reverse the effects of sin in society, families, and communities. And it's time for us to do that now, church. It's time for us to do that now. What would happen if all of God's church in America said, you know what, we're going to sacrifice ourselves. We're going to lay down our life and follow him. What would happen in America if we all did that? Well, I don't know. And we're not in charge of all of America's churches, so that's kind of a silly point to question. What would happen in Spring Hill if all of the churches in Spring Hill did that? We all got serious about following Jesus, and we're going to sacrifice, and we're going to lay down our life, and we're going to do whatever. We're going to reunite the races, and we're going to feed the poor, and we're going to do all those things that God said he wanted to do through Jesus. We're going to do it by following his example of laying down our life. What would happen if all of the Christians in Spring Hill did that? Well, again, we can't be in charge of all the Christians in Spring Hill. So what would happen, church, if we just did that? Just us. If every one of us listened to this message, said, you know what, I'm going to lay down my life. I'm going to sacrifice my options. I'm going to sacrifice my comforts and conveniences. I'm going to give in some ways till it hurts because Jesus gave his life for me. I'm going to give my life for him. What would happen to our community if we did that? Well, we may never know because we can't be in charge of all of the rest of us. You can't dictate and mandate sacrifice and self-giving. You can't do that. All you can do is you. All I can do is me. So what would happen if God worked through you? He said to Abraham, through you and your family, I'm going to bless the whole world. What would happen if he did it again through you? And you said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And I can't impact anybody else. I can't make anybody else do something. But for me, for what I control, for my little bit of real estate and time, I'm going to lay down my life so that anybody within range of the gospel will hear the words of Jesus, and the poor will be fed, and the races will be reunited, and all the peoples of the earth will call him Lord. What would happen if you did that and if I did it? Because God did that once through Abraham, and he longs to do it again. I don't know what would happen, but I think it would change everything. I think if we got serious about this, the whole world would be blessed. Racism would become obsolete. Child protective services would go out of business because there's nothing left for them to do. Jails would empty out. Foster parents would have to go on a waiting list because there's just no kids who need help. There's all these people wanting to help, no kids needing help. And I believe that God stands ready to do that again through you and through me and through your family and mine. Stop waiting for the rest of the world to figure it out and say, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Because God said to Abraham, and he meant it, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless your descendants. And the whole world's going to be blessed through you and your faith. And I think God stands ready to do it again. Jesus' call to the world was not just to believe in him. That's a big call. That wasn't his call. Jesus' call to the world was follow me. Pick up your cross daily and follow me. And our world stands ready with as many needs as ever, waiting for the people of God to believe that enough to try it. Let's be the generation that tries it. Would you bow your head? God, I ask for your power. I ask for your power, God, to come over to your people, not through our loudness, not through our boasting or declaring or whatever. I pray that your power would come over us through our sacrifice. Sacrifice has always been the way that you plan to change the world. You did it through your son. You did it through your prophets. You're calling that for us. And we don't like that. We don't like submission. We don't like sacrifice. We don't like laying down anything. But that's what you call us to. You called us to follow you. And then you picked up your cross, you walked across town, and you laid your life down for the sins of the world, including mine. And I pray, God, that you would inspire me enough to lay my life down yet again. We trust you, God. You see what's coming so far out. So today doesn't scare you. Today doesn't shock you. Today, I believe, leads you to beg us to be better, to do more, to lay down our life. And God, as for me and my house, we'll say yes to that. Pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.